and then you say, oh, well, people are making wine with the same kind of intention and flavor profile of the beer that I like, then I think that's a much better way to bring people into the category.
That's true. My partner, Miles, he usually gets a craft beer. I gave him a glass of orange wine. He really liked it. And I was smelling the beer and the orange wine, and they had similarities. You've got 2 wines that you want to taste with us.
Yeah. The 2 wines that I have actually tie into topics we were just discussing. The first wine is Sivi Pinot, which is Pinot Grigio from Kabaj in Gorička Brda, Slovenia, the winery that I've stayed at both times I was there. And they have fantastic food as well that they pair with the wines. It's an orange wine.
Beautiful color.
Yeah, this is really lovely. The other one is a fruit wine. This is not wine, a blend of apples and Pinot Noir from Subject to Change Winery here in California.
Do you have a thirst to learn about wine? Do you love stories about wonderfully obsessive people, hauntingly beautiful places, and amusingly awkward social situations? Well, that's the blend here on the Unreserved Wine Talk podcast. I'm your host, Natalie McLean, and each week I share with you unfiltered conversations with celebrities in the wine world, as well as confessions from my own tipsy journey as I write my 3rd book on this subject. I'm so glad you're here. Now pass me that bottle, please, and let's get started. Welcome to episode 141. Why are fruit wines becoming more popular, and how do they differ from grape-based wines? What is a Pét-Nat style of wine, and which ones should you try? And what are wines from Slovenia like, and which foods pair best with them? You're going to get all of those answers, plus more wine tips in the second part of our chat with Nikki Goddard, a wine writer and educator based in Oakland, California. You don't need to have listened to part 1 from last week first, but I hope you'll go back if you missed it after you finish this one. In the show notes, you'll find a full transcript of our conversation, links to both of my books, how you can join me in a free online wine and food pairing class, and where you can find me on Zoom, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube live video every Wednesday at 7 p.m. That's all in the show notes at nataliemclean.com/141. Now, on a personal note, before we dive into the show, I've listened to audiobooks for years as I prefer it to reading a physical book, but I've always felt guilty, like I really wasn't reading. And like, what is that? Audiobook shame? However, I've just heard, of course I did not read about this, that audiobooks stimulate the brain equally with that of reading physical books. Yay! And for me, audiobooks have some advantages over those physical relics. The intimacy and emotion of the human voice, often the author's, that lights up the theater of my mind. And while we're on this subject, I'll mention that my first book, Red, White, and Drunk All Over, is available as an audiobook from Audible, iTunes, and Apple Books. My second book, Unquenchable, isn't yet, but I think the book will speak to you if you drink enough wine. Okay, on with the show. Now, you also write about fruit wines, or you've written a really great article for Janice Robinson on fruit wines, and those would be wines that are made from fruit other than grapes, like you mentioned, apples and pears. So why are fruit wines gaining in popularity, do you think?
So the focus of my article was actually blended fruit with grapes. So wine grapes and other fruit. There are a lot of
co-ferment, Yeah,
so they're not all co-ferment. That was one of the things that I struggled with when I was writing this article, because there's not one cohesive term that covers the whole category, because a lot of the terms that people are using refer to production methods that don't fit every wine that's made like this. And you can't even really say wine. It's not wine. So I started seeing this category appear about 3 years ago. And I thought it was kind of like a one-off. I think the first one I tried was from Art and Science in Oregon. And it was Gruner Veltliner grapes and apples. And it was just unlike anything I'd ever tasted before. It was so cool. And I was like, wow, I want to find more of these. And then I didn't see any. And just like the early part of this year, I started seeing them everywhere. And there's a big natural wine scene here in the Bay Area. And some of the winemakers that I really like were starting to release these co-ferments. And I was like, this is interesting. Like, where is this coming from? And I dug into it and I realized like, okay, this is like a pretty new thing. Like most of the time when you see like a new wine trend, like Pet-Nat or Piquette, you look back and you're like, oh, this seems new, but it's not. They've been doing it for thousands of years. But it doesn't seem like anyone was really doing these on a commercial level until about 10 years ago. And it hasn't really become like more common until the last 3 years and really the last 1 year. And so I was writing an article for a different publication about trends in wine. And I started researching the fruit wines for that. And the more I researched it, the more I was like, I think there's a story here. So I started talking to producers. And what I found out was that the inspiration for this was across the board, like very kind of like an optimistic and hopeful attitude where everyone had different reasons, but they're all making these wines to kind of make lemonade out of lemons. So we had a winemaker in the Loire Valley who lost a lot of his crop to frost and hail. And so he supplemented his grapes with apples and pears.
Because they're more hardy and resistant to frost and disease. Thicker skins than grapes,
And then in California, so it turns out they're also more resistant to smoke taint. So we had winemakers who lost a lot of their crop and they decided to use other types of fruit to supplement what little grapes they did have. Then there were some other producers who were doing it out of a spirit of collaboration with their friends. It's like, hey, I'm making wine. My friend is making cider. Let's get together and see what we can come up with, which I think is just a really cool thing about the natural wine movement, that it is so collaborative and it's such a community. I think a lot more than you see in mainstream wine with bigger brands. And then there was Steve Mathiasen in Napa and his wife, Jill. They grow a lot of other fruit on their property, and they have these really special heirloom peaches that they normally sell to restaurants. And because restaurants were closed during COVID, they actually already were making like a Sauterne style peach sweet wine. And they decided to co-ferment peaches and Chardonnay. And they made this incredible dry wine. Like when I read about it, I was like, oh, that sounds pretty good. And then I tasted it and I was like, wow, this is like, it's serious wine. So these are all dry. And they range from kind of like fun and juicy to really complex and possibly age-worthy, but nobody really knows yet. And they're just like so likable. Like I've been pouring them for all my friends and I haven't met anyone who didn't love them and ask where they could find more. It's such a cool thing because all of these people took challenging situations and turned it into something really positive. And now they're selling out like within days of getting released every time. People are trying to produce more of it. They're also a really great kind of crossover beverage. I think we talk a lot about like in the wine industry, we ask, oh, like wines like Barefoot that you buy at the supermarket, like are those good gateway wines for people to get into more serious wines? And I don't think they are. I think that if you're drinking Barefoot, you're probably not going to make the jump to really high-end wines or natural wines. But I think if you're drinking beer or you're drinking cider and you just haven't really gotten into wine, but then your favorite cider maker does a blend of cider and grapes, then you might say, oh, well, maybe I want to check out like the other wines that the winemaker makes. So I think that in order for something to be a gateway, I think it's more about like the philosophy behind how it's made. I think if you're drinking mass-produced wine, you're not going to be that interested in like an artisanal, handmade, small batch wine. But if you're drinking other categories of beverages and then you say, oh, well, people are making wine with the same kind of intention and flavor profile of the beer that I like, then I think that's a much better way to bring people into the category.
That's true. My partner, Miles, he usually gets a beer, a craft beer. I gave him a glass of orange wine. He really liked it. And to me, I was smelling the beer and the orange wine, and they had similarities. You know, I agree with you in terms of the crossover aspect. But all of this talk is making me thirsty. I'm drinking water here, but you've got 2 wines that you want to taste with us today. I would love to see what they are and why you chose them.
Yeah. So the 2 wines that I have actually tie into topics we were just discussing.
Perfect.
The first wine is Sivi Pinot, which is Pinot Grigio from Kabaj in Garishka Brda, Slovenia. This is the winery that I've stayed at both times I was there, and they have fantastic food as well that they pair with the wines. It's an orange wine.
Beautiful color.
Yeah, this is really lovely. And then the other one is a fruit wine.
There we go.
It's backwards, but it says this is not wine. And it is a blend of apples and Pinot Noir from Subject to Change Winery here in California. And it's done in a Pét-Nat-style.
Interesting. So that's Pétillant Naturel, or naturally sparkling wine.
Yeah.
For French. And it's kind of just, again, for those who might not be familiar with these, if I understand correctly, at just a very high general level, they're bottling it while the first fermentation is still taking place, as opposed to just the second fermentation as they do in champagne.
Yeah, and then the pressure in the bottle creates the carbonation.
Right.
Very ancient style. It predates champagne.
Okay. Yep. All right. So which one would you like to taste first for us?
I think I'll start with the Kabaj.
Okay, great. I'd love to hear what you think of it. Just loving that color.
Yeah, this color is beautiful. I'm just eyeing this vase on my counter that matches it perfectly.
It's great. Well, the window light from behind you has got little shafts of amber light coming through the glass. It's beautiful.
I would call this color goldfish.
Oh, goldfish. That's neat.
I like to think of more fun colors than the usual ruby, amber.
Yes,
I'm a big color person, so...
Yes, you are, having studied textiles. Yes, that's right. Color is one of your key passions. You know, I always admire what the rosé folks in Provence did. They have almost like more than a lipstick wheel. It just goes from ballet slipper, onion skin, all of this. Like, it's pretty cool. But so what does that one taste like for you, Nikki?
This one definitely has some oxidative qualities. They age these wines for a long time before they're released. So you're definitely going for that style. There's a lot of like nutty, kind of almost caramelized character, even though it's not sweet at all. It's really savory. It's got kind of saltiness, sort of like Castelvetrano olive brine, which is one of my favorite things to taste in wine. I love wine that tastes like green olives.
You definitely are a tolerant taster. I can't eat olives, so wow, it's definitely palate driven for sure.
Yeah.
I have to hold my breath when I walk in the grocery store when I'm like walking beside olives. It's like, it's so weird. It's so weird.
I'm not weird with bananas, but just the peels. I can eat bananas, but the peel is nowhere near me.
That's great. So what would you pair that wine with?
Something kind of hearty, but not like heavy meat. Like polenta, maybe, would be really nice. Or like prosciutto and melon. Definitely something that is savory, but with a little bit of brightness as well, because this is like a pretty intense orange wine. I would say like this is not an orange wine for beginners. I don't know the exact amount of skin contact that it gets, but it's longer than most. So it's pretty robust. So yeah, I would want to make sure that I had something pretty hearty with it, but not something super heavy, because then that would just weigh everything down.
Right. The weights would be off. Cool. So how about the fruit wine, or the co-fermented fruit wine? Pinot and
apples.
Apples. That's an interesting combination.
And this one is an interesting color. It's like strawberry jam.
Strawberry jam, yes.
It's very opaque. This is clearly unfiltered. That's actually pretty unusual for a wine this color. I can't see anything through it.
Huh. Are there little floaty bits in there?
I can't see any, but I had this bottle a few days ago, and I think there was a lot at the end of it.
Okay, yeah. Well, here in Canada, our 4 major wine-producing regions produce wines from grapes, but all the rest produce wines from other fruits. So I'm going to definitely see what they're up to there. I wonder if there's any co-ferments.
There are some producers in Canada who are doing co-ferments.
Okay. Do you know any of them off by name?
There's a list at the end of my article that has some of them. I think Revel might have been the biggest one in Ontario.
Okay. Yep.
Actually, I don't know if it's my power of suggestion, but now this is tasting like strawberry jam too.
Yes. Does it taste sweet, or is it still dry?
You know, sometimes when a wine is really fruity, it has like the perception of sweetness, but it's not actually sweet. This definitely has that. It's got like a sour cherry jam and like rose petal notes, but not quite like super fresh fruit. It's more like stewed, like a compote, like rhubarb and...
Oh, that sounds good. That sounds nice for summer. Might even serve it a little chilled. Yeah.
Yeah, you would definitely chill this.
Chill it? Yeah, okay, good. And what would you serve it with? Like what food pairings might work with that one?
I think I usually drink fruit wines without food just because they're so fun and I kind of want them to be the star of the show. And I'm often drinking them like outside with friends, but this would be a pool party wine. I don't know, like fruit salad, I think would be really, I mean, it's a little on the nose, but I think that something so like bright and lively and refreshing needs to be paired with something equally refreshing.
Yeah, that sounds good. You have two other things there to show us. One is a favorite wine book. So maybe you can let us know what that one is.
So the book I mentioned earlier, Questions of Taste.
Questions of Taste, but the philosophy of wine, and they have to argue each question, both sides. Okay.
So I read this really, like I said, really early in my wine career. And it really, I don't think I realized it at the time, but it's really, when I look back, it's informed the way I think about and talk about and write about wine. You know, I'm often writing kind of more like basic educational pieces, but what I really love to write about is like digging into the more theoretical side of wine. Why do we like what we like? Why do we think the way we think about it? And I think that this book was really what made me realize that I could even be asking these questions. And I've actually been meaning to reread it because it was so long ago that I read it. And I would love to kind of revisit some of the opinions that I had at the time. It's very intellectual and stimulating and really just makes me think about wine in a different way than any other book I've ever read. That's great. I'm going to definitely have to get that one. And then you have a favorite gadget, so to speak. What is your favorite wine tool or whatever? I'm not much of a gadget person. I'm a very old school analog person. So I don't really love all the technology that's trying to like, I was researching for an article recently. I had to look up different types of decanters. And there was one that was like an electronic decanter that like you put it on like a little stand and it decants the wine somehow in like 5 minutes, but it also like plays music and like, and it was like an iPod for wine. It just seemed like so over the top. And it's like, okay, you could get something for like $20 instead of $300 that does the same thing in 20 minutes instead of 10 minutes. Is really worth it. But I just love this decanter because, first of all, I really like the way it looks, which is important to me. It does have a little aerating thing, but it's just little holes on the side. So it's not anything high tech, which I like. It just kind of gives the wine a little extra air as you're pouring it, but it, you know, it doesn't make the slurpy noise or anything. And it also looks really cool when it's going into the bottle. And then it has this strainer here, which is great because I'm clumsy and I break corks a lot. So
right, me too.
You break the cork and you're just like, whatever, I'll just strain it out. It saves a lot of worry.
And where did you get that decanter? Do you remember the brand?
The brand is RBT. It's from the internet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to share some photos that you have shared with me.
Yes.
Yes. I love this one. It's so much fun. Tell us what's happening here.
That was early COVID. My boyfriend and I were staying at his parents' house in Sebastopol. That's his mom, Susan, and his cousin, Alexandria, who was staying with us for a while. And we were really determined to make the best of the pandemic and trying to cheer ourselves up by having dress-up nights and festive dinners. And one day we were getting ready for dinner and someone spilled a bunch of champagne. And everyone was upset for a minute. And I said, hey guys, we don't want to cry over spilt champagne. Let's grab some straws and don't let this go to waste.
That's great. What good spirit. All right. And this is your boyfriend?
Yes, that's Emmett.
And you like to cook together? That's quite a spread.
That is like the foundation of our relationship. He is the first partner I've ever actually liked to cook with because we work very well together in the kitchen. It's like choreographed almost. So I absolutely love hosting Thanksgiving. I think I've done it 7 out of the last 10 years. And this was the first Thanksgiving we hosted together at his parents' house. And I am generally not an organized person, but I'm also a very all or nothing person. So when I decide I need to be organized about something, it's pretty extreme. So I have like a whole Google Drive folder on my phone of Thanksgiving spreadsheets, and I have
spreadsheets.
Yes, spreadsheets and recipes and shopping lists that are like organized by section of the grocery store. And every year I print out all the recipes and we tape them up to the wall, and it's like a battle station, and we figure out the exact timing. And this was us pulling it off pretty much on time for the first time together.
Looks beautiful, the spread. Wow. And here you are. Look at that cutie as well, who's with you. You call him a pandemic puppy?
Yes. Yep. There are a lot of them.
So cute. Oh my goodness. Just the eyes. Holy smokes. What is his name?
His name is Oscar. He is an Aussie doodle. He's half poodle and half Australian shepherd, and he just turned 1 last month.
Sweet. He does wine tastings with you.
He does.
Does he like the Pet-Nats?
We think that he likes white Zinfandel. We've decided that that's his personality.
That's great. So here you are in Germany.
Upstate New York.
Oh, it's upstate New York. Sorry. I'm thinking of another Constantine. Anyway, upstate New York. So tell us why this winery has particular meaning for you.
So Dr. Konstantin Frank was this really amazing figure in the wine industry. He was an immigrant from Ukraine in the 1950s. I can't remember exactly what he was doing, but he had some very high profile, advanced degree type job in the wine industry. And he moved to New York to try and improve his family's financial situation, and noticed that the climate in the Finger Lakes was really similar to the climate back home. And at the time, nobody there was growing vinifera grapes, which are the European grapes that we see in pretty much all the wines that we drink. Most people were growing either Native American varieties or hybrids of French and American varieties. And so he was one of those kind of like mad genius figures that you hear about in the wine industry, where they're always saying like, oh, like, I think we can do this. And everyone's like, you're crazy. And then of course they try it and it works. And everyone was like, oh my God, you're a genius. So he was trying for years. He moved up to upstate New York and got a job as like a janitor at a grape research station because he was just trying to get in the door. And he just kept like hounding everyone for years. And then finally he convinced someone to let him plant some Riesling. And they said, okay, if it lasts the winter, then I'm going to let you keep doing this. And of course it did. And now the Finger Lakes is one of the best regions in the world for Riesling. So Dr. Frank is very special to me because I discovered my love for wine while I was studying in that region. And I think that because I didn't go to school to study wine, it happened by accident. I think if I hadn't gone to school in that area, I think I would have eventually discovered wine, but my career probably would have taken a different path.
Wow. Yeah, because Cornell is in Ithaca?
Yeah.
Okay. And so how far is that from the Finger Lakes region?
It's in the Finger Lakes region.
Oh, it's in the Finger Lakes. Okay. Mm-hmm. Clearly, I haven't been there yet. So I'm thinking I'm in Germany. So yeah, wow, cool story. Now, is this Austria?
That is Austria.
I shouldn't guess. I should just let you tell me.
Yes, okay. That is Austria.
Where in Austria are you here?
Somewhere along the Wachau River. I don't remember exactly where that was. That was on a press trip in 2019, which was a really cool experience.
Yeah. Awesome. And here?
Napa.
Oh, Napa.
That's maybe the third and last time as an adult that I've ridden a bike.
Oh, why was it the last time?
I mean, it's not the last. It's just the last so far.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I thought there was a big accident or something. It's like, really, are you scarred?
But, I will say, when they say it's just like riding a bike about something, that doesn't really make me feel confident because I have forgotten multiple times how to ride a bike. So it's not comforting to hear that.
Well, especially after you've been sampling. So
yeah,
makes it a little bit more challenging. The reflexes. This is a beautiful photo. Where are you here?
That is Friuli, the part of Italy that is right near Slovenia. We were driving and saw this field of sunflowers and said, well, how can we not have a photo shoot here?
Perfect for Instagram.
That photo is square because it was on Instagram.
This is fun. Where are you here?
Yeah, so I said when I do something, I do it 100%. So that's me relaxing 100%. That was up in, I think, Mendocino County. That's Greg. He's our pet unicorn.
I guess he travels with you. A little bit far from the water, though. Oh, this is your arm, is it?
That is my arm.
Wow.
That is, you can see the real thing. I don't know how to get the angle.
There you go.
Yeah, that is a wine map of France. I never thought I would get a tattoo until my late 20s. And then I decided that I wanted a wine tattoo, but I didn't want a wine tattoo that anybody else had. Because everyone in the wine industry who has a tattoo has grapes or corkscrew. And I was like, if I'm going to get something on my body forever, I want it to be really original. So it took me about a year to come up with that. And then I waited another year to make sure that I really wanted it. And I have no regrets. It's incredibly useful. Whenever I'm drinking wine with friends and we're drinking something from France, they'll say, oh, where is this from? And I'll just be like, oh, it's right here. My dad always told me, like, oh, if you get a tattoo, you're never going to get hired at a job. And I've been in job interviews where the interviewer notices the tattoo and then calls in the CEO of the company and says, you have to see this. And then I get the job. So
that's great. Absolutely. That's unique. Like it. All right. Dunn Vineyards. That is a cult Napa Cabernet. Where are you here?
That is at a restaurant called Bayonne in San Francisco, but we brought the bottle from home. That was a gift from a very generous friend.
Yes.
I do not drink a lot of Napa Cab, but when I do, I like it to be from the 80s or 90s. I think that the style of winemaking then was more in line with my palate. And also I love the flavors of really aged wine. So that was a really special bottle.
Awesome. And this one, the Rare Wine Company Historic Madeira?
Yeah, Madeira. I really love this particular style of Madeira called Cercial, and it's the driest style of Madeira, which is fortified wine that's kind of similar to sherry. And I have had several incidents in restaurants where I've ordered a glass of Cercial and been given something else. And I said, I don't think this is Cercial. And they've said, oh, no, it is. And they make up all these excuses for why it is the thing that it isn't. And this was a couple of days after I'd had that experience for the first time. And I'd been given a different style of Madeira and they didn't want to admit to me. But finally they were like, okay, yeah, it was what you said it was. So I was like really frustrated. And then a few days later, we were at a different restaurant and I saw that they had Cercial. And of course I ordered it and I was very, very happy to receive the correct wine.
That's great. Speaking of color and textiles, this is an article you wrote, but you did these illustrations too, didn't you?
I did, yeah.
Beautiful. I just love your sense of color and the whimsicalness of these.
Thanks. They're really fun to do. You know, when I was a kid, I used to do art every day and I don't really do it very much anymore. So I love when I get asked to write an article that I also get to illustrate because it's a good excuse to get a little visual creativity in my life.
Was this East Bay Edible?
Edible
magazine?
East Bay, yeah.
Edible East Bay, okay. And there you are with one of your heroines.
Yes.
Janice Robinson.
It was probably the most starstruck I've ever been. Janice was very much an inspiration for me in the beginning of my wine career and has remained that way throughout. So it was just such an honor to get to meet her and hear her speak and then later be published by her.
Where are you here?
That is at the San Francisco Wine School. She came and did a seminar on the new edition of the World Atlas of Wine.
Okay. Terrific. And this is a fruit wine, I think.
Fruit wine, yes.
There you go. I think that is the last one I have here. Oh, no. We have a fun one at the end. What is this?
That is karaoke in Palm Springs. Karaoke is pretty much my favorite thing to do other than drink wine. Everyone who comes over to hang out at my house knows that if we have enough wine, it's probably going to turn into a karaoke night.
That's great. Love it. Well, Nikki, this has been fabulous. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you'd like to mention as we wrap up?
Yeah, I guess I just want to say, like I was talking earlier about being intimidated by wine. If anyone takes anything away from my writing and what I have to say about wine, it's that wine really should be fun. And if you're intimidated by it, experience it as much as you can and try and find ways to explore in a comfortable setting. Find a wine bar or wine shop that you trust. Get to know the person who's selling you wine And if you give them feedback on what you've enjoyed that they've recommended for you, then they're going to be able to do a much better job of recommending something to you next time. So it's really good to have one place, at least while you're kind of starting out, it's good to have one place or one person that you trust to make recommendations. And don't be afraid of being wrong. I love being wrong because it's an opportunity to learn something new. So that might come from like getting a fact wrong, or it might come from me saying, oh, I hate Viognier. I've never liked a wine made from Viognier. And then someone gives me a Viognier that's delicious. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Like there's some good Viognier out there. I get it. You know, it's always an opportunity to learn and to grow.
Yeah. Great attitude. Really well done. And where can we find you online, Nikki?
You can find me on Instagram at Instinctive Drinking.
Okay, great. Nice handle. Instinctive Drinking. All right. Well, thank you so much, Nikki. I'm so appreciative of the time you spent here chatting with us. Just a great conversation, lots of great stories and tips. So thank you so much and look forward to chatting with you again in the future. Take care.
You too.
Bye for now.
Bye.
Well, there you have it. I hope you enjoyed our second chat with Nikki Goddard. Here are my top takeaways. Number 1, Nikki gave us an excellent overview on why fruit wines are becoming so popular now and how they differ from grape-based wines. She's made me really thirsty to seek out these wines more often. 2, I also thought she did a great job explaining the Pét-Nat style of bubbly and why it's so trendy. I'm adding those to my list as well. And 3, finally, she sparked my interest in Slovenian wines. And even though I've tried several of them and like them immensely, I'm looking forward to drinking more of them and experimenting with some different food pairings. In the show notes, you'll find a full transcript of our conversation, how you can join me in a free online wine and food pairing class, links to both of my books, and where you can find me on Zoom, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube live video every Wednesday at 7 p.m. That's all in the show notes at nataliemaclean.com/141. You won't want to miss next week when we chat about luxury wine marketing and which wines really are worth the splurge with Robert Viernick and Peter Young, co-hosts of the Ex Chateau podcast that features insights, analysis, and perspectives on news and trends in the wine industry beyond winemaking. They join us from their homes in San Francisco. In the meantime, go back and take a listen. I chat about orange and natural wines with Anne Sperling. I'll share a short clip with you now to whet your appetite.
I think that's really what I'd like to see happen with orange wines is lots of small batches and lots of engagement at a really foodie level, like right there with your plate of whatever, you know, your local fresh vegetables and locally raised meats and things like that. And to really start thinking about winemakers as farmers and as people that are making their meals more interesting.
Absolutely. And you refer to yourself as a wine grower.
Exactly. Yeah. But it's the engagement with consumer. I think that we have some barriers to that with a big organization like the LCBO distributing our wines and making it more distant from the consumers. And sure, it's more convenient for everyone. But at the same time, I think we want to engage and realize that our wine and our food are coming from our local agriculture.
If you like this episode, please tell one friend about it this week, especially someone you know who'd be interested in the tips and wines that Nikki shared. Thank you for taking the time to join me here. I hope something great is in your glass this week, perhaps a fruit wine or a Pét-Nat bubbly. You don't want to miss one juicy episode of this podcast, especially the secret, full-bodied bonus episodes that I don't announce on social media. So, subscribe for free now at nataliemaclean.com/subscribe. Meet me here next week. Cheers.